Yeah, Ramsey, I'm not sure if you are logged in and whatnot, so if you can maybe just give us a view of, now that Eric has done that in the Workbench, basically set it up. Eric, I'm not sure, we didn't show anybody the API. So when you push that configuration, you get an API key, which you can then use in whichever environment it is that you want to actually put this app into production. So Ramsey, if you could just very briefly take us through that.
Will do. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, cool. So Eric is now showing you how all of those kind of recommenders, we showed you how one recommender was set up. Like Jess said, we have 3 recommenders. So we're just going to show you quickly how Adlo app building engine we used integrates or interacts with those API endpoints. So obviously Adlo is just the engine that we used. You can use whatever platform you want to use. You can run it from a different app building engine, or you can run it directly through some own website that you've built that interacts with APIs, or you can just call the APIs directly if you just want to do that, or you can build it into an entire production system. So it's all API driven, so you can use it from any use case that you want to. But in this particular one, Adlo we're using, we basically have 2 types of calls. We have the get a recommendation call and the accept a recommendation call. So for how Adlo's deals with lists, we have to define those get calls as what they call external collections. So we essentially have these 3 external collections, one for each of the recommendations. We can maybe start with the images. So what this actually does is it does a call to this API endpoint. So we tell it to go look at this recommend score.ecosystem.ai of recommendations. So that's the API endpoint. And that actually sets up, with all of these parameters that we send through, it sets up the recommendation for the images. So we tell it to use this campaign, the Adlo showcases images, tell it what channel is coming through. In this case, it's coming through on the app. Tell it what the customer is. We have no customer context saved here, so this customer is just going to be a non-customer. Then we tell it how many offers we want to receive, 4 in this case, because we see 4 images. Then we give it the extended contextual information. In this case, there are no extended contextual information, so they're just all blank. And the sub-campaign, in this case, it's just used for logging purposes, so we're just calling it showcase, and the user ID is just the person who made the calls. This is also for tracking and logging cases, so that you can track exactly who made the call, or not necessarily who, but the platform that made the call, or if you have specific cases of different apps, you can say this is app 1, app 2, app 3 making the call. So just gives you an extra layer of logging, and then you set up the kind of individual things. This external collection is actually meant to simulate a data store. So you have to set up all of these individual ones. So we're only going to be interested in the get all functionality. So we just set up this particular one. We tell it we're going to get that endpoint using the get method. And in this case, we just tell it to go 1 level deeper, because the JSON structure that gets returned from that API recommendation has a lot of kind of metadata around it, but the actual kind of list that we're interested in is saved in the final result key. So we just tell it that this is where the image data is that we're interested in. And essentially these external collections, then whenever somebody wants to read from this external collection, in this case it's this list object that generates all these images, that tries to read from this external collections, the showcase images one, and actually does a fresh call. So each time you see that list, or you come into the page, or you do some kind of call to that collection, it will do a fresh call to the API. So that's going to be nice. But obviously now, once we have selected or shown some recommendations, we want to be able to select those calls.
If that's a
accept.
Who does the caching, or is the caching switched off at this stage?
It's turned off. I was just going to mention quickly, Ramsey, that what happens, and the reason why we do that, it's a bit like a click-through rate versus impression, if you had to think of it in kind of Google Analytics terms. And so that means that you present something that the person sees. So there's nothing you can cache because every call is unique to the API. And I think that is the key trick here is that you have the right level of performance through the scoring engine because it is doing it in single-digit milliseconds, that the client has got no feeling of it doing any work. It thinks that it's done deliberately. It was designed to only show these images or only show these menu items, whatever it is. But in actual fact, everything is done to collect data about that human's interaction. So the idea is that every time that you, say, refresh a new set of images, the person saw it, so it's an impression. They didn't like it, they call refresh, they saw a new line of impression, or a new list of items, it's another impression. Then you select one, then it knows that you've selected one. And then it calls the update to say that the person have been presented with 8 items or whatever the number would be, and they only accepted this particular one. So that means that if you have a recommender that want to test which pictures work with which movies, or which products work with which interaction, which combination of products work well, or which combination of interactions work well, you can set up any combination and start tracking the ones that are actually being accepted. And as they're being accepted, you update the scores in the background based on your parameters for your engagement. And you can then change your front-end behavior without you having to design it deliberately. So the only deliberate design is the fact that, like Ramsey was saying, I want to show 4 pictures. I don't know what they are. I want the recommender to tell me which pictures to recommend, which emotions to recommend, which. So that means that classically how you would have designed this is you would have coded the pictures and you would have done if then else as an UI. Now you purely call the recommender to do all the work for you. And while you do that, it learns dynamically about the behaviors of the people engaging with you across all the different elements.
So I've actually got the scoring dashboard open if we want to maybe give a view of the offers presented, offers accepted.
I think maybe just go through all this and then we can do that after I just talk through all the accepts and whatnot.
Okay, just cognizant of time.
Yeah, so we show now the images list. Maybe something just to show quickly is because Eric showed that the images names are actually just saved as text. So what this thing actually does is it takes the name over here and it looks up the actual image in this image database over here. So over here we have the actual database. It has some images associated with those names. So it just does a lookup. It knows the row 4 was recommended, so show that image. So when you actually then decide to select one and you want to accept it, it does a accept call to the API, which looks something like this. So we just tell it to go to this call, the recommend score ecosystem response using the post method, and then we add in this information. So the first information that's important here is the UUID. So that UUID is the UUID that was given by the response. So it tracks back the accept offer to that specific response that was given. So it saves that in the internal kind of metadata of this app. So it tracks that context and tells you, okay, accept this batch of offers that was given, and of those 4. So this UUID is telling you it was those 4 that recommended, and of those 4, this was the specific image that was accepted. And that image data just comes from through that button that you clicked here. So it can pick up the information. It's not necessary to run a test request. So that then picks up the context from this kind of list element here, and it knows that was the image name. So that was selected. Then once that selection is actually done, it pushes through all of that data, context to the next page. So you see it links to this emotion screen over here. Then we have a very similar setup here. This just shows the image from the previous one. So it just shows the current image using the filters that it does over here. And then we have a new recommendation. So this list here just once again calls this external data collection here, which does a fresh call. And once again, if you click on accept, it'll do a similar call to that. So just, I don't know if you want to maybe, I'm not sure how we're going to do this on dual screens to show your screen and my screen at the same time.
Oh, actually, maybe we can try that. I might actually just end up stealing your
Might be
share.
easier just for you to click through it and show the score screen as well, because I'm not sure if I'm logged in.
Can everybody see my screen and Ramsey's screen?
I think it'll put yours on pop yours at the top. Mine will be visible, but you have to find it in all of the windows.
Yeah, people would have to find a window and click the, there's a pin. If you click the pin, that's the page that will appear, or the window that will appear.
You can just do recommendations now, and then you can just see this information updating. Okay, so I'm going to click now on an image.
So this is the movie recommenders. Let's go to the image.
All right, recommended some emotions for me. I'm going to click on an emotion, accept that.
Let's go
That's
to the
recommended.
emotions.
I'm going to accept the movie. So
Let's just
assuming
zoom
that
in.
can update.
And go to the movies. You'll see here is the interaction.
Yeah.
Because while you guys are doing that, what happens in our clients where they've got millions of interactions, you imagine this dashboard, so you can only show the last 10 seconds if you've got like thousands of interactions per second. So what happens is there's an aggregation view as well, and you'll see at the middle panel, just below the top panel, what we see for now. That aggregates at about 3-minute delay, 1-minute intervals. So that means throughout a day, you'll see those that aggregation, those two aggregation panels will be empty until it aggregates. The ones below it, you'll see it's aggregation office and aggregation office accepted. So that's why you see those two are empty. Just for context. Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe show what was hard shows was presented.
So just for the last 5 minutes now, let's just see what the emotions one. You can see here are Ramsey's interactions that happened just now. Offers accepted 1. That was the emotion that he chose. Was it fear, Ramsey?
I think it was 0.
Yes, the offers accepted. So you can see that obviously this was the one that was accepted out of the ones that were then recommended out of fear, love, and anger.